Riley, a little crippled puppy, was left unloved and unrecognized in the corner of a busy animal shelter every morning. Despite the staff's best efforts, Riley's physical state turned off all possible adopters. One day, however, when a young child and his parents arrived at the shelter, what he did next moved everyone to tears and transformed Riley's life. Forever, children's laughing filled the busy animal sanctuary with vitality. The buzz of chatter between employees and guests, and the enthusiastic yips of canines meeting possible families. A little puppy named Riley was sitting in a peaceful corner amid this lively scene. His soulful brown eyes watched the world pass with a silent, resigned hope while his rear legs were propped up on a small wheeled cart. Unlike the other dogs, Riley sat calmly, his eyes tracking each other, and he didn't yelp or wag his tail eagerly. Passerby as though to inquire if today would be the day. But most visitors looked away because of his infirmity, which frequently caused hesitation. Their smiles faded into courteous compassion as they passed by his kennel for a little while. Behind the scenes, Riley was loved by the shelter staff, who did their best to support him because they respected his fortitude and kind nature. Emphasize his appeal to potential adopters. They would add, "He's the sweetest dog you'll ever meet." But their remarks frequently went unnoticed since they desired the ideal pet, not one with extra obstacles. Riley's glimpses of hope decreased with time, and he spent the majority of his time spent laying in his kennel, watching the busy shelter around him with little hope. But that the doors of the shelter opened on a different autumn morning, and a family arrived, with his parents following him. The small boy with the disheveled brown hair looked about, taking in the lively. He walked through the pandemonium of the shelter, past wagging tails and frisky puppies, his feet slowing as he got closer to Riley's corner. In contrast to the others, squatted down to meet Riley's. Looked through the bars, his words tainted, his face softening with wonder. His mother nervously came up, looking at Riley's cart, but he seemed to be waiting for me with calm awe. The youngster muttered, "Hello, buddy," without seeming to realize or care that his little palm was pushed against the kennel door. For the first time in weeks, Riley raised his head and gave a slight wag of his tail. This was Riley's story, and it wasn't simply another family strolling past. Really got started. Ethan, an 8-year-old youngster with an indisputable spark of. His eyes were filled with compassion and interest as he knelt next to Riley's kennel. With hesitant and worried looks on their faces, the parents waited a few feet away. Ethan's mother, Grace, yelled. Ethan trembled and said, "Come look at the other dogs. There are so many to choose from." He's staring at Riley, "But I like him, Mom. He seems to need a buddy." Grace looked at him, alongside her husband Mark, who shrugged and gave him a minute. Mark said to Riley, feeling the boys, his tail wagging somewhat more now. Sincerity edged closer to the bars. "The fact that Ethan likes me," the shelter worker assigned to Riley, made his face light up. Dana, a happy young woman, came up smiling broadly. "You have a terrific eye, and Ethan Riley is a unique dog." Ethan asked, his fingers still pushed against the kennel door, "What happened to him?" "He has been here for a time." Squatting to get on his level, Riley suffered a puppy accident that left his rear legs crippled. But he's incredibly brave and has mastered using his cart to travel around. Ethan gazed at Riley with admiration, like a superhero. He whispered softly, and Grace's forehead wrinkled as she looked at Riley. She said, "I need a lot of extra care," in a worried tone. Well, Dana acknowledged that he does require a little additional care, such as routine examinations to ensure his cart is fitted correctly and assistance with. He's quite independent and has the sweetest demeanor. He just needs help with some things, like going upstairs. Ethan turned to his parents and needed someone to give him a chance. His eyes were bright and eager. "Could we please take him home, Mark?" Ethan hesitatingly scratched the back of his neck. This is a huge responsibility. Although caring for a dog is difficult, Riley may require even more assistance from us. Ethan nodded sincerely and said, "I'll do everything in my power to help." Grace knelt next to him, with her son's hand on his shoulder. "Ethan, are you certain there are many?" Ethan answered steadily, "There are other dogs here, young and healthy, but they already have people who want them." For a brief period, there was silence broken only by Riley's voice, "And he doesn't need me." Mark glanced at the smooth whine, then asked Dana if we might spend some. He begged Dana to spend time with him, and his countenance brightened. "Of course," he said. "Let me take him out to the play area." A few minutes later, Riley was wheeled cautiously into the outdoor area, where Ethan was waiting with Riley's tail and a tennis ball. Wagged wildly as Dana opened the kennel door, and he rolled excitedly in the direction of the boy. "Hello, Riley," Ethan whispered quietly. Riley held out the ball, smelled it, and then pushed it back toward him with his nose. Ethan giggled, demonstrating how intelligent the two of them are. Riley flew after Ethan in his cart, as they played for what seemed like hours, with Ethan racing around the yard. Even Grace and Mark couldn't help but smile as they witnessed the friendship that developed between their son and this happy barker. The little puppy, who had been passed over by so many, turned to face Dana. Her voice was soft, but he seemed so unique, Dana. Riley has endured a lot, but he hasn't allowed it to ruin his spirit. They transform the lives of those who take them in. They don't just require a place to live. We'll need to make some changes at home, such as installing new ramps for the stairs. Mark massaged his chin thoughtfully. Grace smiled, her eyes softening, and she made a schedule to ensure he got what he needed. However, it would be worthwhile to stay close by. Ethan knelt next to Riley, softly petting his. For the first time in a long time, he whispered, "Fur, you're not alone anymore." Riley appeared genuinely happy. His brown eyes betrayed the trust he was starting to develop. It seemed as though he realized that this family might just. Ethan's parents ultimately decided that Riley would join their family as the second opportunity for him. As Riley was loaded into their vehicle and adoption documents were signed, the shelter personnel assembled to bid them farewell. Dana knelt down and gave Riley's head one final stroke while crying. She whispered, "You're going to have a great life, buddy." Ethan's eager talk filled the journey home. "Riley, you'll sleep in my room, and we'll play every day. I'll make sure you're the happiest dog ever." Mark grinned "You have a big heart, kiddo," he added, observing his kid and the dog in the backseat in the rearview mirror. "But keep Riley's going to require more attention, as I am aware. But Dad," Ethan assured me that we would work it out when they got home. Grace led Riley to the green, spacious backyard, which was ideal for a dog too. Riley happily spun himself around, sniffing his tail every turn. Wagging constantly, Ethan's first few days went more smoothly than anyone had anticipated. Was a dedicated caregiver who made sure Riley was comfortable and assisted him with his cart. Grace and Mark were astounded by their son's perseverance, but they soon faced their first obstacle one evening as Ethan and Riley abruptly halted his cart as they were playing in the yard because it had been stuck in an uneven spot of dirt. Ethan attempted to release him, but Riley gave a startled yelp, and Ethan frantically contacted his parents. Mark hurried outside, carefully removing Riley from his wagon and checking him over. "I believe he's okay, but we should exercise caution." Ethan nodded, tears welling up in his eyes. "I didn't mean to harm him. I assumed he could take it." "It's okay, Ethan. You were unaware that this was a teaching moment." Grace gave her son a deep hug. The experience served as a wake-up call for all of us, because Riley's condition meant that there were limitations to what he could. That evening, Mark and Grace met with Ethan to talk about how they could help Riley more effectively. Mark suggested that we make certain adjustments, such as leveling the backyard or installing ramps, and that we take Riley to the veterinarian for a. Ethan listened carefully and nodded. "I'll do whatever it takes to make sure Riley is okay. Riley deserves the best." The next day, when they went to the veterinarian, who verified that Riley was unharmed by the incident, but suggested physical therapy to help him strengthen and better adjust to his cart. The veterinarian also recommended a nearby. Grace examined the booklet that suggested a support group for families with impaired dogs would be beneficial to them. "This may be beneficial for us, Ethan, and we could learn from it," the veterinarian told her. At first, Ethan wasn't sure if Riley would enjoy it, but Grace grinned, suggesting that other families have experienced this. Later that week, they went to a community park for their first support group meeting, which will benefit you both. To Ethan's amazement, there were numerous other families with dogs similar to Riley, each facing particular difficulties, and Riley appeared to blend in perfectly with the stories, wheeling around and sniffing with the other dogs while wagging his tail joyfully. Ethan was particularly drawn to a girl named Mia and her dog, Cooper, who had lost a leg. Despite Cooper's disabilities, Ethan's age recounted how she had put a lot of effort into making him feel like a normal dog. Mia told Ethan that dogs don't think of themselves as broken. They merely. Ethan nodded carefully, seeing Riley's interactions with Copper, and said, "I want Riley to be loved. For him to be content no matter what." He stated, the support group not only provided the. Ethan came home to his family more motivated than ever after giving them helpful advice and fortifying their determination. They immediately set to work leveling the backyard in order to improve Riley's quality of life. To keep Riley occupied, Ethan installed ramps throughout the house and even built up a little obstacle course. Hours teaching Riley how to run the course and encouraging him at every turn. But Riley wasn't the only one who was. The family started to observe a change in Ethan as well. He was more. It seemed as though taking care of Riley was teaching him lessons outside of the classroom, since he was more patient, sympathetic, and resilient. Never could. And as Ethan's confidence increased along with Riley's, they were conquering difficulties, demonstrating that love and willpower could enable anything, including adjusting to live with. Riley was both wonderful and difficult. Each day was different, and Ethan and his parents. The family had to adjust to their own routines, while Riley was flourishing in his new setting. One of the first changes made to meet his needs was to create a timetable that Grace was always able to stick to. Proposed allocating duties. Mark and I will take care of Riley's playtime and eating after school, while Ethan will. Ethan replied enthusiastically, "I'll do my best, Mom," as he manages therapy and appointments. Ethan got up early in the morning to make Riley's breakfast. He weighed out Riley's meal precisely, and Riley wagged his tail as Ethan helped him into his wagon, making sure everything was secure. Grinning, "Buddy, you're ready for the day." Riley had begun weekly physical therapy sessions, which soon turned into a. Riley practiced pushing his cart across various terrains during a family gathering at the rehab center under the supervision of a kind and understanding Laura, the therapist, explained to Ethan Riley why his muscles must remain. Ethan watched carefully, stepping occasionally, but consistency is crucial. He's strong, especially in his front legs. Mark and Grace, you have this Riley, one impoverished at a time. During these sessions, Mark kept a tight eye on their baby. One day, he leaned over to Grace and whispered, "Have you seen how much?" Grace grinned as she saw how responsible Ethan has become as a result of this. Riley was at his best when he was home, and the physical surroundings also showed the improvements. Riley was able to walk around the house more easily thanks to the ramps, and Ethan enjoyed taking Riley up and down the ramps, applauding one evening as Riley's cart raced across the smooth wood as. While Ethan was guiding Riley through the backyard obstacle course, Mr. Thompson, a neighbor, reached over the. "You've done a fantastic job with that puppy, Ethan, and I wasn't sure how you'd handle it." Riley is obviously in good hands, though, as Ethan grinned and thanked Mr. Thompson. Though not every day was easy, Riley is the best and is teaching me a lot as well. Riley gave a surprised yelp when he tripped while attempting to cross a damp place in the yard on a rainy afternoon. With his heart racing, Ethan hurried over to kneel next to Riley and carefully examined him. "You're fine, buddy, Ethan. I'll be more cautious the next time Mark joins them," he whispered, his voice trembling. Ethan nodded. "These things happen. It's all part of learning," as he carefully lifted Riley and carried him inside of him. The experience led to another adjustment, so I'm determined to make sure it doesn't happen again. The family chose to cover a portion of the yard in order to provide a safer outdoor play area. Ethan assisted in laying it down, working with Mark late on a soft, non-slip surface. Riley gingerly tried it into the evening after they were done, wagging his tail in agreement despite the difficulties. Joyful moments became commonplace. Riley's character developed and is playful. Nature was contagious, and he enjoyed chasing balls. When he finally caught one, Ethan rolled toward him and barked with excitement. Even Mark, who at first thought that you were slower than I anticipated, frequently joined in with clapping her hands and laughing. Concerned about the additional duty, he began to connect with Riley. One night, Ethan saw him sitting on the. Mark remarked, "You have a good dog here," as Riley nestled up next to him on the couch and scratched. Riley's special behind the ears, Ethan smiled. He's family, the support group. also established a routine in their life. And every time they met, Ethan excitedly reported Riley's development, while Mia and M once remarked, "Riley is fortunate to have you." As her dog Cooper continued to motivate him, Ethan shook his head, saying that not everyone would go this far for a puppy. It's about doing the right thing, not about going far. One of the most life-changing experiences occurred at a community gathering that the support group's families organized. Ethan offered to speak while standing on a small stage with Riley at his side after being urged to share their story. "Riley taught me that he came into my life when he needed someone the most, but I didn't understand I needed him too." The audience roared in applause, demonstrating that love is about attempting no matter what, not about what you can achieve flawlessly. Grace and Mark watched with pride as Ethan gave Riley a hug while wiping away some tears, who joyfully barked and wagged his tail. And by night's end, a number of people came up to Ethan and thanked him for his. According to a woman, "Your story serves as a reminder that every life has worth, regardless of." Ethan grinned as he looked at Riley. "The challenge is he's the one who taught me that as." As the weeks passed and the family found a routine, the difficulties of raising Riley turned into opportunities. They were building a life where Riley was more than simply a crippled dog. He was a cherished companion for their mutual development and bonding. Member of the family, their relationship with Riley got stronger as the family grew closer. However, there were some new difficulties in raising a dog with a disability. One of the first problems started when a community celebration that included a pet parade and talent contest was advertised. Animals of many types. And Ethan was excited to join Riley's demonstration. Ethan told everyone how wonderful he is, and one night at dinner, "We could show off his obstacle course prowess." Mark raised an eyebrow. "Are you certain, Ethan?" Riley might become overwhelmed by the significance of the event, but Ethan's excitement didn't. "We'll practice daily, and I'm sure Riley will adore it." Grace grinned, even though she expressed Mark's worries. "Ethan, if you're adamant, we're here to back you. Just keep in mind that Riley's comfort arrives." Ethan initially responded enthusiastically, already seeing Riley wowing the audience, but Ethan recognized the difficulty of the task as the parade day drew near, and he understood that training at home was one thing, but on the morning of the occasion, the family came early to discover that the raucous public event had completely changed. There were activity booths around the walkways, loudspeakers playing music, and dozens of pets in the park. Riley sat in his cart and gazed around suspiciously as their owners wandered about, but Ethan knelt next to him and gave him a gentle pat as he tucked his tail and lowered his head. "I'm right here." Mark bent down. "And his fur is fine, Riley. Perhaps we should." "Ethan looks anxious, so avoid the talent show." He bit his lip and looked at his dad. "Let's try." Riley followed after Ethan, his cart rolling slowly, and the parade started. "If he doesn't want it, we'll stop it." At first, the applause from the audience seemed to excite him, but as the talent show's performance area approached, Riley froze his. Ethan squatted down, his heart sinking, his ears pulled back, and he cried softly. "We don't have to do this, Riley." The announcer called their names. Ethan. Ethan turned to his parents, defeated, and Riley, the incredible rescue team. "He's afraid, but I don't want to push him." Grace knelt next to Ethan. "And it's all right." As they were ready to depart, Mia showed up with Cooper. "So you're doing the right thing, honey, by prioritizing Riley. Don't give up yet, Ethan." She advised Riley to occasionally watch Cooper perform. Ethan hesitated before nodding. "Okay, let's try," in hopes that seeing another dog will help. The audience applauded when Cooper took the stage and performed a number of tricks, hardly hindered by his missing leg. Riley rejoiced, and his ears pricked up a little. Ethan noticed the change and murmured, "Want to try it?" Riley kissed Ethan's palm, his tail swinging slightly, and Ethan smiled broadly. "Yes, buddy, let's demonstrate your skills on stage." Ethan led Riley through. Riley initially hesitated to proceed on the obstacle course they had rehearsed numerous times at home, but as the crowd cheered, he became more self-assured, and by the time he got to the last ramp, Riley was. Ethan lifted his arms in triumph, while joyfully wagging his tail, and the audience burst into cheers after their performance. Attendees praised Ethan and Riley's relationship and tenacity, with one woman saying, "You've shown everyone that our identities are not defined by our limitations." Riley is great, and Ethan smiled while patting him. Riley has taught me more. Even if the march was a success, life still presented obstacles a few weeks later that I could never educate him. As a more severe problem developed, Riley started to exhibit symptoms of pain in his front legs, which supported the majority of his weight. Because Riley was evaluated by Dr. Patel after the family took him to the veterinarian with concerns about his health. She clarified that we could attempt a different cart design that distributes weight because his front legs are under a lot of strain. The weight, but he will require rest and possibly more treatment. Ethan became anxious. "Will he be all right, doctor?" "Paddle should be given the proper care and modifications," she told them, "but you'll need to keep a close eye on him." Ethan was greatly affected by the news, so he spent hours looking into better carts and helpful therapeutic methods. Mark and Grace were impressed by their son's commitment, but they were also concerned about the emotional toll it was taking on Riley. Mark sat down with Ethan one evening to take on him. "And you're doing a fantastic job." "Job, son. But keep in mind that asking for assistance is acceptable because Riley is a member of our family." Ethan nodded and continued, "We're all here for him and for you." "I just want him to be happy, Dad." "He already is," Mark said. Ethan quadrupled his smile thanks to you and his parents' encouragement. In an attempt to lessen Riley's leg pain, they acquired a specially made cart and added new exercises too. Riley's progress in his treatment sessions was slow, but Ethan's perseverance never faltered. Instead, the difficulties they encountered deepened their relationship and taught Ethan and his family that love wasn't about excellence. It was about perseverance, kindness, and cooperation. As Riley adapted to his new cart and therapy regimen, the family discovered that they were on a more intense emotional journey. Riley's development was gradual, and although Ethan maintained his optimism, there were times when he faltered. One rainy afternoon, Ethan sat on the living room floor and began to wonder if he was doing enough for Riley. As the room brushed Riley's fur, Riley closed his eyes and relaxed into the sensation. Ethan felt happy, but his thoughts were elsewhere. "Why is it taking so long, Ethan? I thought the new cart would fix everything," he murmured to himself, his fury rising to the surface. Hearing her son's tone, she laid down her book and sat down with him on the floor. "Ethan," she whispered softly, "isn't that right?" Ethan glanced at his mother's eyes and said, "It's not just about getting fixed. It's about love and patience. You've done so much for him already." Burdened with anxiety. But what if it's insufficient? What if Grace placed him in pain and I was powerless to stop it? Putting a hand on Ethan's shoulder has already transformed his life, and he is content as a result of your treatment. Isn't that right? Always quick or simple, but worth it. Riley nuzzled Ethan's hand as Ethan grinned slightly and scratched Riley behind the ears as if he could sense his discomfort. "I'll keep trying later that week," he whispered, adding another test of. When Ethan brought Riley back to the park for a follow-up therapy session, they became closer. The park was crowded with activity, and a number of kids were having fun close by, while Riley worked on weaving and negotiating short slopes. A group of children paused to observe the dog through cones, and one lad yelled. Ethan felt slightly uneasy but smiled sweetly as he pointed to Riley, asking what was wrong with his legs. "His rear legs don't work, so he rides about on a cart," another child questioned, his voice pouring. "Why would anyone want a dog like that?" Curious, a female from the group interrupted Ethan before he could reply, saying that she thought he was great. Moved calmly and deliberately as she approached Riley, saying, "Hello, Riley," quietly. Ethan's chest grew proud as Riley, who was stooping to pet him, licked her hand and wagged his tail. "He is amazing," he said. The girl looked up at Ethan and smiled. "He's stronger than most people realize. You're blessed to have him, Ethan." "Yes, I truly am." Following the interaction, Ethan considered how other people saw him. Riley had a fresh perspective after realizing that although some saw him as limited, others saw him as resilient and beautiful, purposefully reminding him why he had put in so much effort for Riley. But the difficulties didn't stop there one night. Riley started to whine softly as the family got ready for bed, and Ethan quickly went to his side after realizing that Ethan is having trouble moving his front legs, Mom and Dad shouted in a panic, Mark and Grace ran over, their faces full of. Mark grabbed his car keys at the door and said, with concern, "Let's get him a Dr. Patel." Riley was evaluated by Dr. Patel of the veterinary clinic, and it appeared that he had overexerted his front legs. She added, "Ethan has to modify his treatment and get more sleep because this type of stress is normal for dogs in carts." I believed I was assisting Riley as I sat next to him and stroked his fur, but perhaps I pushed him too much. Dr. Patel smiled kindly at Ethan, saying, "You're doing everything right, Riley. Progress is a journey rather than a sprint, and he is fortunate to have someone who genuinely cares about him." On the way home, Ethan sat quietly in the back seat with Riley, his mind racing, unable to get rid of the guilt that he felt accountable for Riley's discomfort. But Riley experienced a sense of relief as he laid his head on Ethan's lap. "You're not giving up, are you?" Riley's tail waggled slightly in response to Ethan's whisper, as though to say never. For Ethan, the days that followed marked a sea change as he understood that Riley's journey was about more than simply physical recuperation. It was about adjusting, appreciating their little triumphs, and connection. Ethan started to take a fresh stance when it came to Riley's care, concentrating not only on their success, but also on their shared satisfaction. Ethan observed a change in himself, becoming more understanding of Riley's demands and more committed to acknowledging each small victory. When Riley, during therapy, Ethan ascended a tiny ramp and cheered louder than anyone else, making people grin. "You got this." Ethan spoke with pride, saying that every obstacle they overcame only made their relationship stronger while instructing Ethan. That genuine love was about showing up no matter how difficult things became, not about being flawless. And in Riley's steadfast spirit, Ethan discovered a mirror of his own fortitude. Ethan and Riley had discovered a cadence in their therapy sessions for their new life together got more fluid. Daily cart walks became simpler, and Riley's happy spirits started to shine brighter than before. But just when everything appeared to be coming together, a new obstacle appeared. One bright afternoon, the family was in the park for something that neither Ethan nor his family had expected to happen. Dogs of all sizes and shapes were leaping, jumping, and waving their tails at a community pet event. Ethan proudly displayed Riley's cart and responded to inquiries from curious onlookers about how it operated. Riley was a hit with. A middle-aged man carrying a clipboard captivated the hearts of everyone with his tenacity and joy. Walked up to Ethan, who was wearing a well-ironed shirt bearing the emblem of a local animal rescue group. "Hello there," the man said, holding out his hand. "I'm Robert from. I've been following Ree's story online, Midwest Animal Heroes." "You're right, Ethan." He nodded and shook his hand. "That's me. It's good to meet you." Robert knelt down to pet Riley, who joyfully licked his palm. "He's such an..." Robert's voice was full of appreciation as he stated, "I work with creatures with. I've never seen a happier, better adjusted puppy with difficulties, and you've done a fantastic job." Ethan smiled, but Robert's expression became more solemn, "which is why I wanted to discuss something with you. Have you ever considered adding to Riley's tail and perhaps assisting other canines in comparable circumstances?" Ethan. Robert raised his head, curious, and said, "What do you mean?" He then stood and pointed to photos of disabled AD dogs that were adopted via his group were displayed in an adjacent booth, and Riley could be the face of hope for a lot of animals if they were seeking for ambassadors to help raise awareness. Ethan was ecstatic, but Robert had a catch. Serving as an ambassador would require flying to occasions, making media appearances, and even going to shelters to encourage adoptions. "It's a huge dedication," Robert stated while giving Ethan a pamphlet. "However, I believe Riley and you would be ideal for it." That night around the dinner table, Ethan proposed to the family that Riley may assist other dogs in finding homes. Ethan stated with excitement as he handed his parents Mark the brochure. Mark carefully read it. "It sounds fantastic, but additionally, it seems like a lot of effort. Are you certain you're prepared for this?" Ethan paused. "I believe so, but what if?" Grace leaned closer to see if Riley was overwhelmed or if it was too much for me. Thoughtful expression, "It's a fantastic opportunity, but you also need to consider Riley's best interests. He's content right now, but will." Due to all of this attention, Ethan was unable to stop thinking about Robert's offer for the following 3 days. thought Riley would encourage other families to adopt dogs with disabilities. But he was also concerned about taking on such a large. Riley had already endured a great deal of responsibility. Was it reasonable to expect more of him? The turning point occurred during Ethan saw a young girl sitting on a nearby bench holding a plush animal during a particularly touching therapy session. She appeared uncertain in her lap. Her gaze focused on Riley as he rehearsed scaling a ramp following the exercise. Ethan. He said softly, "Do you want to meet Riley?" And the girl nodded shyly. Ethan led Riley over, and after a little pause, she reached out to pet him. Riley leaned and wagged his tail. Her initial reserve was broken by his normal warmth as he touched her. "What's his name?" she whispered quietly, and Ethan replied. The girl looked up at Ethan with sparkling eyes and said, "He's my best friend." Ethan experienced a pang of sympathy after my dog, who was also my best friend, went away a few months ago. "I'm so sorry," he remarked. "They have a way of making everything better, aren't they?" The child nodded, her smile small but sincere. "Riley is so fortunate to have you." And as Ethan saw the girl leave, he understood that Riley's tale was already. Perhaps Robert was correct to make a difference, even in tiny, unexpected ways. Perhaps Riley could motivate others not only by her actions or beauty, but also by demonstrating to others what fortitude and. That evening, Ethan sat at Riley's side and ran his fingers through. "What do you think of the dog's fur, buddy?" He inquired whether we could do it or if we could assist others. Riley's response was evident as he licked Ethan's palm and wagged his tail, much like you do. Making the choice to proceed with Robert's plan wasn't simple, but after Ethan convinced OLV to accept it anew, Riley's existence began when the two were invited to their first gathering, a local. People of all ages were crowded at the Adoption Expo, and Riley with his. The highlight of the performance that Ethan prepared was his contagious enthusiasm and wagging tail. He painstakingly created a little booklet detailing Riley's journey, complete with pictures of his metamorphosis for the day. The family arrived early and set up a table, along with a beautiful letter expressing how much Riley had improved Ethan's life. Decorated with banners above, posters, pamphlets, and Riley's favorite toys. As the fair got underway, guests read Meet Riley, a tale of tenacity and optimism. Ethan had prepared his prepared speech as they gathered in their booth, but it soon became clear that Riley's charm required no introduction. Kids knelt next to him, adults inquired, and, midway through the day, Ethan received inquiries from a number of people who wanted to adopt other dogs from the shelter Riley had come from. Saw a young couple standing off to the side, seemed uncertain. The man looked at the woman as she cradled a baby in her arms. Sensing the dog's hesitancy, Ethan approached them nervously, Riley trotting beside him. "Hello there. This is Riley. Would you like to meet him?" Ethan remarked with a warm smile. The couple looked at one another before moving in closer. Weck acknowledged that they were considering adopting the man, but we're concerned because we have a. Ethan agreed. "Baby, we're not sure how a dog would fit into our lives." He acknowledged their worry that it could be a significant transition, but Riley has demonstrated to me that dogs have a way of bringing out the best in others despite everything he's been through. His love and loyalty have remained unwavering, perhaps like a dog. Like he may impart to your family the same lesson that the mother squatting with her infant safely taught Riley. Squinted at the child's small hand, the infant laughed, and the woman's. By the end of the fair, her expression softened and she muttered, "He's amazing." The man thanked Ethan and Riley after the pair completed adoption papers for a 3-legged dog named Milo. "We appreciate you helping us realize what's possible in this amazing moment filled with Ethan. Pride." But there were difficulties throughout the day. As the ceremony came to an end, a group of youths approached there. With mocking laughter, they gestured to Riley's cart while speaking to one another. Ethan reacted angrily, but made an effort to keep his cool. One of them scoffed, his tone more vicious than inquisitive. "What happened to your dog?" Ethan stood erect, covering Riley's back with a protective hand. Riley was born strange, but he is stronger than a majority of canines and people I know, and nothing can stop him. And that's all I can say because several members of the group squirmed uneasily before slinking off, while others in the vicinity. Throughout the interaction, spectators gave Ethan encouraging nods and gentle claps. left him feeling disturbed and strengthened his determination. Riley's story was about more than hope. It was about overcoming ignorance and demonstrating to the world the worth of every person, despite its flaws. As they prepared to depart from Robert, approached his face with a mixture of pride and support, saying, "You handled that beautifully." Or what matter? You and Riley are transforming people's perspectives one individual at a time. When he got home, Ethan thought back on the day with his family and declared it to be fantastic. It's difficult to stroke Riley's fur while the dog is cuddled up next to him. Grace put a reassuring touch on her son's shoulder, which is why you're seeing Riley the way we do. She said that while not everyone would comprehend, those that do are making something. This is why doing is so vital. Significant. Ethan and Riley went to more events throughout the following few weeks. Narrative gaining popularity online and locally. They went to schools to discuss resilience and inclusiveness and were received with families thinking about adopting, and even encouraged a nearby pet supply company to provide the shelter with supplies. But as their routine became more hectic, Ethan started to observe Riley's signs of exhaustion. Despite his desire to please, the dog began to fall behind on walks and appeared less enthusiastic at activities one evening than Ethan. When he combed Riley's coat, he saw that the dog was breathing more heavily than normal. "Are you okay, buddy?" Ethan inquired worriedly. With a smile on his face, Mark recommended that Riley see a veterinarian. The examination showed that Riley was healthy, but need more. The veterinarian indicated that he's content, but that he needs to take breaks from his busy schedule. Since he has experienced more than most people, Ethan heeded Hart's advice to reduce there. Riley's well-being came first, so Ethan had to make the adjustment, which was challenging but essential. Despite everything, he had to strike a balance between his desire to assist others and his duty to look after Riley. Gradually, Ethan and Riley's relationship grew stronger with each minor triumph. The lives they impacted served as evidence of their shared journey, and as Riley fell asleep that evening, his mind, Ethan leaned on his lap and muttered, "We're doing this for you, buddy, for everything you've given me." Riley persisted in their lobbying and motivational trip. The two became local celebrities as a result of their compelling story, attracting interest from regional news sources and social media platforms well beyond their small community. But the demands and expectations increased along with Ethan's profile. One morning, he received an email from a national pet group asking Riley to attend a well-known charity as the honored guest. The purpose of the event was to raise money and publicity for animal shelters nationwide, and Ethan's heart leaped with delight. It was a fantastic chance to spread Riley's tale, but it also presented a difficult task. The gala was a live event with cameras and spectators. With a great deal of uncertainty around dinner that night, Ethan informed his family of the news. He continued, "This could be huge for Riley and the cause." Grace thoughtfully nodded as he showed them the invitation. "It sounds daunting, especially for Riley, but it's an honor, Ethan. You're convinced it's the proper move?" Mark said, "Because Riley's story is no longer solely about you." Ethan realized that Riley was doing well in their daily routine and that comfort must come first, but the gala would be an entirely other setting. It was too much to ask of any dog, much less one with Riley's special. Over the next 3 days, Ethan couldn't get rid of the sensation that this was an opportunity they couldn't miss. Ethan spent weeks preparing for the event by consulting with trainers, spoke in front of a mirror, and they even made arrangements for a local television crew to come to their house and tell Riley's tale in preparation for the gala. But as the big day drew near, Ethan saw minor changes in Riley. The dog appeared restless. He frequently moved uneasily in bed at night and was less. The night before the gala, Ethan sat on the stage with his typical enthusiasm muted. Riley pounded his head and the floor next to him scratched softly behind his ears. "Are we doing too much, buddy?" he whispered, tail gently resting in Ethan's hand. But the gleam in his eyes had dimmed. The following day, the gala venue was grand, with red carpets and sparkling chandeliers, and the family got into their car and traveled to the city. In a sense of refinement that made Ethan feel uncomfortable as they walked inside, Riley drew, which attracted people's attention right away. Riley struggled to keep up with the reporters who were asking Ethan questions as they gathered around singing and taking pictures. Ethan could sense his dog's discomfort halfway through, even though he was waving his tail and welcoming everyone with his typical kindness. The lights were dazzling as Ethan and Riley were led onto the stage for their spotlight moment. Ethan's sweating fists gripped the microphone as he heard the thunderous clapping. Started talking, sharing with the audience Riley's journey, his tenacity, and the significance of providing every animal with a shot at life. But his attention kept straying to Riley, who was. As Ethan concluded his remarks, he was breathing heavily and moving uneasily at his side. Observed Riley's legs quivering a little. Panic struck him, and he bowed immediately, down, embracing Riley and whispering, "Don't worry, buddy, we're almost there." Completed. The audience cheered, thinking it was a prearranged show of love, but Ethan understood. Better backstage, he motioned to Riley's parents and seated him on a cozy blanket. Grace, who had been anxiously observing from the wings, hurried over and kneeled next to Riley. He was worn out, Ethan observed. I shoved him too far out of remorse, but Mar put a comforting hand on Ethan's shoulder and said, "He'll be okay. He just needs rest." But Ethan, you two learned a lesson that evening at the motel. As he watched his puppy sleep, Ethan remained awake by Riley's side, crying. He whispered, "I've been so preoccupied with what we can do for other people that I haven't given much thought to what's best for you next." When Riley's leash appeared in the morning, he perked up a little and began to wag his tail. Ethan decided it was time to. The gala had been a success because they prioritized Riley's health, even if it meant reducing their public appearances, raising a substantial amount of money for animal shelters. But Ethan decided to concentrate on. There were conflicting feelings about Riley's well-being. Although he was relieved to know that he was prioritizing Riley, he also, as they came home, they struggled with the guilt of maybe failing the cause they had worked so hard to support. The morning, Ethan started reconsidering their strategy in an effort to find a balance between activism and Riley's comfort. Ethan contacted shelter director Robert after they got back to express his worries, saying, "I think we need to slow down. Riley has been fantastic, but the gala showed me that we're pushing him." Ethan acknowledged in a voice full of remorse. Robert listened carefully before answering. "Too hard. He's been through enough already. What you and Riley have accomplished is amazing, Ethan. But you're right. It's too much for one dog to handle. Perhaps it's time to consider how you may encourage others to take charge without requiring Riley to be the center of attention all the time." Ethan agreed, but Robert grinned and said, "Riley is the core of our story. He can still be what? If we turn our attention to Riley's message, you've already demonstrated to others what is possible. Now is the time to encourage them to take action." Motivated by Robert's remarks, Ethan came up with fresh ideas for animal advocacy that don't rely on. He thought about launching a blog to provide updates on Riley's life and other rescue animals based only on Riley's presence. He also considered developing teaching materials for shelters, schools, and community organizations that support them to implement comparable outreach initiatives. But before making any significant adjustments, he contacted a nearby elementary school that had earlier indicated interest in hosting in order to test the waters. This time, he suggested an alternative framework for him and Riley to discuss instead of. Riley would make a video presentation about Riley's experience while Ethan was there, and he would talk to the pupils about. The school warmly accepted empathy and kindness, and Ethan spent the following week preparing the presentation. Together, they went through Riley's pictures and videos, picking out scenes that showed his tenacity and happiness. On the day of the presentation, Ethan recorded a moving narration with Grace's assistance that connected the images, stood in front of a group of excited kids, and as he played the movie, the students became enthralled and the room became silent. As the film concluded, Riley's story, hands erupted and the kids barraged Ethan, wondering how Riley learned to walk while pushing his cart, what we can do to support animals like him, and whether we may go to the. Ethan grinned, his heart bursting with optimism at the kids' excitement and interest as they visited the shelter to see more pets. As the lesson came to a conclusion, an instructor informed him that the message was still having an impact, even though Riley wasn't there. "I've been teaching for more than 20 years, and I've never seen my kids, so I went up to Ethan with tears in her eyes." Encouraged by the success of the presentation Ethan gave, and I appreciate you demonstrating to them the power of compassion. I believe that this could be the path forward after his encounter with his parents and Robert. He stated that Riley doesn't have to be present in person to have an influence, and his tale is compelling enough to stand alone as Ethan started moving his advocacy activities. He also observed that Riley had changed. He appeared more at ease and made fewer public appearances. His lively energy returned, and they went back to their favorite activities, leisurely afternoons and morning strolls in the park. Riley's joy was reaffirmed on the porch, and during evenings spent snuggled on the couch. Ethan had made the correct choice, but a fresh problem arose just as life was starting to settle into a familiar pattern. Came out one evening when Ethan was going through his inbox and saw a note. National feature was the subject line of an email from a reporter at a major news network. Opportunity: Riley's journey. The reporter asked Ethan and Riley to participate in a televised segment after praising their work. It was an opportunity to reach millions of people with inspirational animal stories, but it would also require travel and placing Riley in. Ethan spent hours analyzing the email's benefits and drawbacks while working in a high-stress setting. Grace and Mark gave their support, but let him make the final decision. Ethan lay up that night, and Riley was better than anyone. Grace said, "Whatever you decide, I'll be there for you." Curled up by his side, he reflected on everything they had done together, the people they had impacted, and the following morning, Ethan finally made up his mind about the journey they still had ahead of them. Wrote a courteous refusal in response to the reporter, explaining that while he was grateful for the chance to prioritize Riley's health over his own, agreed to work together on a piece of video or a written feature that might highlight Riley's experience without needing. Ethan felt a rush of calm as he hit send, having regained his equilibrium. Ethan's choice to turn down the TV feature was a way to respect Riley's tale and preserve their relationship. Pivotal moment in his relationship with Riley, it was an unambiguous statement that their advocacy work would always come first. Riley's contentment and health over praise from others. But when word of Ethan's choice circulated throughout the neighborhood, reactions from the community and supporters were divided, with some praising them. Others chastised Ethan for prioritizing Riley, saying that it was a mistake to decline the opportunity. The criticism, particularly from some animal advocacy groups, hurt Ethan more than he had anticipated on such a broad platform. Groups he had long admired. One afternoon, Ethan was browsing social media when he saw a message from a renowned activist who remarked, "We risk losing momentum for the cause if we don't use every platform available to us." As Ethan read the comments underneath the post, his chest constricted. Personal sentiments shouldn't take precedence over the larger good. Concurred, citing Ethan's choice specifically, while others supported him, claiming that empathy should be shown to Riley and all other beings. "I didn't anticipate this kind of backlash, Ethan. I told his mother that night that I felt I was doing appropriately, but now I'm not sure." Grace sat down with her needlework while maintaining a constant stare on Ethan. "Ethan, you've done more for the cause more than most people ever would, and your deep concern for Riley's comfort demonstrates the kind of person you." Ethan nodded, but the concern persisted. "Are you not to let anyone make you doubt that?" In an attempt to regain his composure, he asked Robert for guidance over coffee at. Robert started to recline in his chair at the shelter after expressing his concerns about the negative reaction. "No matter what you do, you'll always be critical, but when you look at Riley, do you notice that?" Ethan nodded without hesitation. "He's obviously thrilled. You've made the right decision if you're prospering now." Robert stated emphatically that gaining everyone's approval isn't the goal. "People are inspired by your dedication to your vow principles and your relationship with Riley." Ethan left the shelter with a newfound sense of purpose, not celebrity or recognition. Even though he understood that upholding his morals was more crucial than winning over everyone, he still desired to. Over the next few weeks, Ethan made sure their advocacy work continued to have an impact, even without Riley's physical presence. Devoted himself to his new strategy, collaborating with nearby shelters to develop workshops on humane pet care. With elegance, he worked with Riley's narrative as a case study to create an illustrated children's book about Riley's journey, using captivating storytelling to spread kindness and understanding to even more people. Ethan started a Riley's experiences are shared on the podcast, along with conversations with other pet owners, trainers, and shelters. As these initiatives developed, Ethan observed a change in the way individuals. Riley's story teachers inspired others who had acquired disabled pets to respond to the flood of messages they received, wrote to express gratitude for the educational resources he had given, and other advocates contacted him to work together on. Despite these achievements, a portion of Ethan was still concerned about Riley's feelings regarding similar projects in their towns. Regarding the modifications, one evening following a particularly fruitful day spent working on the children's book that Ethan was sitting next to. "Do you miss it, buddy?" Riley whispered softly as he stroked his silky fur on the couch. Riley gazed up at him with trusting, sparkling eyes as the throng focused on the spectacle, and he gave with a quiet, satisfied sigh, he laid his head on Ethan's lap and softly waved his tail. "You're correct," Ethan murmured, laughing at the gesture that gave him comfort. Ethan smiled and said, "This is where we belong." However, just when they were content with their new path, a surprise letter arrived. Ethan had refused in a letter from the TV show's producer. The producer conveyed both appreciation and regret for Ethan's choice, explaining that she wished to highlight Riley's story in any case, using a masterfully crafted segment that would include the images and films that Ethan had already mentioned that it would be your narrative, your way. Ethan's letter ended. His heart was racing as he gazed at the letter. This was precisely what he had hoped for, a means of sharing Riley's journey without. He phoned the producer right away, sacrificing his comfort, and thanked her for her understanding and consenting to work together on the part. A month later, the feature aired nationally, and it was quite beautiful, fusing Riley's current joy with his previous hardships, highlighting his relationship with Ethan and encouraging viewers to think. The response to adopting pets with disabilities was a flood of donations to nearby shelters. Increased and adoption requests flooded in, but more significantly, Ethan got numerous comments from people who were inspired to change the world, attest to the fact that their narrative had the desired impact. Riley snuggled up at Ethan's feet as he sat with his family that evening for the Impact Act. "We succeeded, friend," he said in a grateful whisper, "and we didn't have to give up anything to make it happen." Ethan was unable to sleep the night the documentary aired because Riley thumped his tail in response, seemingly understanding every word. He felt a mixture of relief, pride, and concern as the last credits played on the TV screen. Riley laid on the couch next to him. His breathing was rhythmic and slow, completely unaffected by the whirlwind their story had produced. Almost instantly, the emails started coming in, and Ethan's inbox was overflowing with more and more personal letters. After viewing the feature her mother authored, more families than ever before shared their experiences adopting pets with disabilities. Regarding how Riley's bravery inspired her son, who had previously been terrified of dogs, and desired to assist at the shelter in their community, one letter in particular brought. It came from a man named Henry who had just lost his elderly father, and it brought Ethan to tears. "I wasn't prepared to let my heart open again, but after seeing Riley," Puppy Max wrote, "reminded me that all dogs, regardless of their situation, should have an opportunity to. I'm going to the shelter tomorrow. Love, to find my next best buddy. Thank you for reminding me that." Ethan's mother, who had stayed up with him to celebrate the occasion, was permitted to read the email. "This is why you did it," Grace murmured, wiping a tear from her cheek. Ethan observes how Riley is already transforming lives. But the messages weren't the only proof that they were right. Choice, Robert at the shelter called Ethan the very following morning, sounding almost out of breath. "Ethan," Roberts exclaimed, "you won't believe this," adding that since the documentary aired, there had been more adoptions in the. People are coming and asking for dogs like Riley pups who may not have had a bath in the last 12 hours, which is more than we've had this month. Possibility. Else, he had an amazing tightening of his chest with emotion. The narrative of Robert Riley is truly changing things, but it goes beyond that. People are discussing what it means to actually give animals a chance at life. And you've begun something bigger than us. Chance, and later that day, that discussion is extending much beyond our shelter. When Ethan and Riley arrived at the shelter, the once calm area was bustling. Families crowded the lobby to sign documents, interact with pets, and share during the activity. Ethan smiled when he witnessed an elderly couple adopting a blind spaniel and a young child embracing a three-legged Labrador. Robert clapped Ethan on the back, saying, "This is because of you and Riley." The sight made my heart skip a beat. Ethan glanced down at Riley, who was wagging his tail as though he could feel the happiness all around him. "This is thanks to all of us, Ethan," Riley responded. "Riley is just the spark. We're all the fire." As they entered the shelter, an amazing event occurred. A youngster, no more than 8 years old, approached Ethan with a tiny sketchbook in his hand. Parents came right after, grinning pityingly. "Are you the man with Riley?" the boy inquired, his large eyes brimming. Ethan knelt down to the boy's level and stated, "I am, and this is Riley," with amazement. The child smiled and brought out his sketchbook, which had hand-drawn images of Riley, while pointing to the dog by his side. Equipped with his wheelchair and his intelligent, enthusiastic experience, the child described on TV that he's. Ethan's throat constricted as he said, "My hero, I hope to adopt a dog like Riley someday." The boy's proud countenance proclaimed, "These are amazing," as he turned the pages. "You're a talented artist," the boy added. "He's been painting Riley nonstop since last night," his mother said with a smile. Ethan looked at Riley, who appeared to be enjoying the moment, and said he wanted to grow up and help dogs who need homes. Ethan replied, "Pay close attention, Riley. I think you're going to do amazing things." The youngster bent down to give Riley a gentle pet. Ethan recognized that Riley's narrative had impacted more lives, and for a brief period, everything seemed to be perfectly still, more than he had ever thought, igniting a compassionate movement that night that extended well beyond their small town. At home, Ethan sat quietly in his living room while Riley curled up next to him and reflected about the trip. They had experienced hardships, uncertainties, and final victories. It had not been simple, but every second had been worthwhile. With a mug of tea in hand, Grace came into the room and sat next to Ethan. Her smile was gentle. "I've been considering what?" She claimed that in addition to changing Riley's life, Ethan, you also altered your own and countless others. Along the way, Ethan nodded while glancing down at Riley, which I never would have imagined. "This began because I couldn't bear the idea of him being ignored, Grace, and it would grow into something so significant." Put a hand on Ethan's shoulder and grinned, realizing that often the tiniest deeds of compassion have the greatest effects. Ethan felt a profound sense of calm as Riley embraced him, knowing that their journey was far from complete and that there were still more tales to tell, share additional lives to impact. But for the time being, Riley was satisfied with their mission was flourishing, and in the weeks that followed, they had worked together to build something very remarkable. Solidified Riley's story as more than a single incident. It spread throughout the nation and animal shelters reported increases in the number of people asking about impaired pets. Families were volunteering to adopt animals they might not have otherwise considered. Prior to social media being ablaze with stories of pets with special needs, each one was more touching than the one before. News organizations wanted to highlight Ethan and Riley once he suddenly found himself in the spotlight. But he always brought the focus back to the idea that giving every animal a chance to be loved is more important than me. Ethan's largest reporter was always amazed at how much her kid had developed as a result of the event. "You discovered your purpose." One evening while they were sitting on the porch, Ethan recounted, Riley was happily sleeping at their feet, his wheelchair glinting in the sunlight. "I think I have, Mom," Ethan said softly as the sun began to set. Sincere, this isn't just about Riley anymore. It's about demonstrating to others that love isn't about being flawless. Regarding connection, they came up with ideas for how to maintain the momentum, and Ethan started a little campaign named Second Chances, which is committed to increasing awareness and offering resources to shelters so they can provide care for. Riley, the campaign's mascot, helped animals with impairments take off, garnering backing from both individuals and institutions. But the most significant occasions came from the daily interactions. Ethan frequently got letters and pictures from families who had. Each person who was motivated to adopt animals like Riley confirmed the significance of their journey one day, just as Ethan and Riley returned from a stroll. The young lad from the shelter with the sketchbook showed up at the door. He was clutching the leash of a timid, three-legged puppy with large, inquisitive eyes at the moment. Max remarked with pride that we had adopted him yesterday, and I thought Riley might want to meet him. Ethan knelt down to Riley gave the dog a tentative sniff before bobbing his tail and greeting Max. His heart swelled with pride and appreciation. The moment of approbation embodied all Ethan had dreamed for, creating a cascade of love and second chances. Ethan and Riley sat in the yard as the sun sank on another day, considering their progress. The once forgotten dog was ignored because of his differences had come to represent tenacity, optimism, and love for Riley. Ethan asked his friend, "Are you ready for another adventure?" Ethan had discovered a greater knowledge of compassion and purpose. The dog scratched Riley behind the ears and gazed up at him. His eyes were full of affection and trust. Ethan grinned at me as well. Imagine how many more animals are waiting for someone to recognize their value. If Riley's story moved you, every little action counts, whether you're prepared to adopt, volunteer, or just share the word. If you like this tale, please remember to like, subscribe to our channel, and watch this touching video next. Let's continue spreading kindness one tale at a time. See you on the next journey.